Teachers of Reddit. What is the craziest thing that has happened in the teacher's lounge? Story 1. Best part of my student teaching practicum in the teacher's lounge during a free period. There's this nice little old lady teacher marking papers while I make some coffee. Nice and quiet. Then all of a sudden she slams her pen on the table and yells, "You call that a thesis statement also?" And gossip about students and other teachers. I became so disgusted over the behavior that I started hanging out in the janitor's room, to which I found out became the new topic of gossip in the teacher's lounge. Whatever, I was never out of supplies, and my room was always spotlessly cleaned. And that's what happens in the teacher's lounge. Mr. L was microwaving some leftover fish for his lunch. Mr. D comes in and says it stinks in here. Who would microwave old stinky fish? Mr. L waits for his fish to finish microwaving, then takes it to an empty corner, but is too bitter after the encounter to enjoy a single bite of it. Story 2. I was a sub for a few months before I left for the Navy. Back then, I didn't actually need to do anything but take a 2-day class to be a sub. $50 a day is pretty good. Anyway, the craziest thing that happened in the teacher's lounge was a principal dressing down a teacher who was adamant about getting more desks in her classroom because half her students in 2 of her 3 classes didn't have one. The principal told her that if she wanted the desk so bad, she should consider stripping. Instead, he was removed sometime after. Turns out he was stealing from the school. Story 3. We had a teacher fired for having with another teacher, and she was the hot blonde teacher that you always hoped was doing stuff like that. Now she works at a Hallmark store, and no, I don't have pics, sorry. Story 4. I work in a language school. We eat sandwiches and talk about how terrible our students are. Occasionally, we'll get into a heated argument about some usage versus actual grammar thing. Other times, we'll play some sort of pass-the-time game. Celebrities who should have been arch-nemeses was one. Clint Eastwood versus Vivian Westwood. Keira Knightley versus Tom Daley. Stephen Merchant versus Marvin Hagler. Stuff like that. Teachers aren't exciting people during teacher time. Story 5. Man, you guys are going to be disappointed. The teacher's lounge is pretty much only used for a microwaving lunch, be taking a dumpsy naps for substitutes. Story 6. Not crazy, but just a weird lunchtime story. I was hired during my time student teaching to work as a long-term sub for a fellow science teacher going on maternity leave. While working, I would chat with a new science student teacher during lunch. One day, he and I are sitting having lunch, and he pulls out some string cheese with an excited, "Oh yeah." He's feeling off pieces while we're talking when the bell suddenly rings. His eyes go wide as he realizes he is only about a third of the way done with this innocent piece of his childhood. He is enjoying. He says, "I can't let the kids see me eating this. They'll never let me live it down." So he decides to finish it in fast forward, not taking larger strips, not biting it like some lame wannabe mozzarella stick, but peeling off thin strands super quickly and shoving them in his mouth. Probably some of the quirkiest behavior I saw during my time there. Story 7. We had just finished the first block period, and most teachers were grabbing a quick cup of coffee before going back to class. We have a caffeinated pot and a decaffeinated pot. I think you see where this is going. Well, somebody accidentally replaced the decaffeinated beans with crystal meth. I normally drink decaffeinated, so I was quite wired for my next class, which was a lab on dissecting frogs. Story 8. Finally one for me. I used to work at a special ed public school up in Harlem where most of the kids were extremely emotionally disturbed. One day, one of the kids threw a textbook out the window of his third-floor classroom, and it landed on a teacher's BMW that was parallel parked in front of the school, denting the hood. The teacher went ape-dash, locked himself in the teacher's lounge, and proceeded to break every piece of furniture in the room. When he finally came out, the chairs were in pieces, the tabletop was laying on the floor, and both the microwave and the refrigerator's doors were ripped off. Some of us helped to clean up, and sure enough, he had thrown the table legs and the door to the microwave out the window, damaging another teacher's car. Guy didn't get punished at all and was seen as a hero to the kids. Story 9. I am not a teacher, but thought this story was worth sharing. At my old high school, 2 guys brought some muffins to the front desk of the school. The people at the office put them in the teacher's lounge, and a bunch of teachers and other staff members ate them. It turns out the muffins had THC in them, and the guys did it as a senior prank. So that's some teacher's lounge hijinks. Story 10. I student taught at a middle school. There was more backstabbing, rumors, and bullying than among the students. It was uncomfortable and shameful, so I stopped having lunch there. Story 11a. A while ago, one of my colleagues said a student touched her between classes. I told her to make really sure it was intentional before she reported it, because our hallways are packed and accidents happened. She ran over, grabbed my hand, and slammed it on her rather large breast. Does that feel like an accident to you? Story 12. Teacher's lounge. Yeah, we don't have one of those. We do have a grungy, dirty basement storage area that leaks and has no windows, no chairs either. Story 13. Oh boy. My mom's a kindergarten teacher, So hey race a story on behalf and in appreciation of her, because he'll never understand how this woman has tolerated all she has. This may not be the craziest tale she's ever told me from her job, but it's been nearly 6 years since it happened, and it's bad enough to still be burned into my mind. It's 4:30 in the afternoon. School has been out for 2 hours, a bit over halfway through the year, and my mom is in the teacher's lounge grading her kids' progress assessments. A really young teacher's assistant had just started this year, numbly shuffles in with this vacant, "My soul has left my buddy and all hope in the world is dead to me" look, and quietly tells my mom she's needed in the vice principal's office. My mom instantly knows something's up, because the school system by itself can't crush spirits that effectively. So she replies, "I'm almost done with my assessments. It'll be there in a few minutes." Teacher's assistant just folds into a chair and tells her, "No, you need to be there now. We now have my mother on her way to the VP's office, 30-second walk from the lounge." About halfway there, she stops. The entire hall reeks of. VP is just standing outside of her office and nods to my mom like, "Yeah, this is for us," with her shirt pulled to cover her nose. So they walk in, and it's one of her students' moms standing there immune to the shit stench, and with his smug "you're getting fired" grin on her face. Mom is by the doorway, and VP is sitting behind her desk, when this woman pulls out of her purse and drops onto it a diaper, full of which spatters on and ruins most of the papers and everything already there. It's her son's note. Kindergarten kids are 5 to 6 years old and are supposed to be potty trained well before this point in time from that day. Woman's mouth unhinges in snake-like fashion. Banshee screaming floods the building with the deafening sounds of "This is my son's. Look at what you did. I specifically told you when school began he can't have chocolate milk. Why did you give it to him? Why didn't you clean him? I am become the destroyer of pants. Bring Heil upon me. As the rivers flow red with the blood of virgins," which carries on for all of the 3 minutes it took for the school cop to remove her from the premises. It also turns out that was the refined V20, and before she made it to the VP's office, she had unleashed her shrieks of misfortune upon the TA mentioned earlier, ripping her soul from the mortal flesh it clung to, because she had seen her in my mom's classroom, helping this one time a few months back. Both the TA and VP quit. The TA within the next few weeks, and the VP after the year ended. It didn't change schools or anything. They just knew they would never regain the cells that they once were after that incident and couldn't continue in education. Mom kept on trucking, though. Just moved to a new school this year, too. Hope things work out for her. TLDR, really shitty things happen in the teacher's lounge. Edit paragraph say, "Few years ago, I stayed late to finish high school report cards in the staff room. I was bored and needed something to do. A few other teachers came in with some of those pink missed phone call message pads. Oh, and an idea formed. A mildly gullible friend of mine, we'll call her Rochelle, at the high school was working with troubled girls who needed credits. The girls were in co-op courses throughout the city, nursing homes, retirement residences, kitchens, etc. And Rochelle was frequently complaining how difficult it was to keep the girls from being fired from the co-op placements. It was very difficult for her to find them sustainable employment. So instead of working on my report card comments that night, I looked up the number for a service called Beth's. I wrote a note for my friend to please call Beth about potential co-op placements using my left hand so my friend wouldn't recognize my writing on one of the missed call slips. Great prank. I then forgot all about it and finished those report cards. 2 days later, I heard from friend of friend on staff that something hilarious had happened to Rochelle. Apparently, she had called Beth asking about co-op placement for the girls. A deep male voice had answered the phone saying, "This is Beth." According to the friend who relayed the story, Rochelle argued with Beth that no, she needed to speak to the real Beth about co-op placements. Rochelle also shared that she was calling from high school and that it was important for the girls to have co-op experience and to get credits. I guess it was finally poor Beth who put 2 and 2 together and told Rochelle that this was a prank and she was calling in service. Apparently, Rochelle couldn't believe it. 7 years later, I have still never owned up to Rochelle that I did that. Story 14. Science teachers tend to lurk in their supply closet instead of the lounge. It's much better in the closet. No drama, a whole pot of coffee to yourself, and some peace for a few minutes. Story 15. I was a substitute teacher for many schools, grades kindergarten through high school. I was shocked at how much gossip and talking goes on in there. It's basically like high school. They talk about the kids, make fun of things that happen in class, and talk about how drunk they were over the weekend. It was like this in almost every school I subbed for. Story 16. I saw another teacher push on the drink machine a little too rough when it ate her money. Also, there's a female who keeps stinking up the men's bathroom every afternoon. I know it's a female because I'm the only male on my floor. Story 17. Once I was loading our water cooler with a big bottle of water. It got away from me and fell. but not before hitting the table, breaking, and totally soaking everything and everyone in the room. Good times, man. Story 18, my time to shine. Years ago, when I taught at community college, one of our profs was caught having with a student in the lounge. He had previously been caught masturbating in there and was warned. Turns out he had a tumor, which was pressing on some important part of his brain related to inhibition. Once we learned of his diagnosis, it explained a lot, like his not being ashamed of being caught and all the bragging he used to do. He was back at work after it was removed. Thankfully, it was benign and back to his normal, inconspicuous, quiet self. Story 19, last year, our principal moved a football table into our teacher's lounge. After our end-of-the-year party, when a bunch of us were helping clean up, I challenged our reading coach's son to a match. I played like a champion and shut him out. He was 10, and he cried. So, there's that. Story 20, well, because this thread is so barren. If you go in during 6th period, you can find para-pros coming in with empty bowls to go grocery shopping. It's really funny after the PDA put on a luncheon for the staff. Nothing will be left. No one says anything because everyone knows they live on $16K a year. Story 21, our lunch break is called Sister Lunch because somehow all the male teachers and the female teachers all have separate lunches. Mostly we chat about our kids at home, not students, and what we're doing for the weekend. The only crazy thing was at my other school at the beginning of the year. When we didn't have enough comfy chairs, we would race each other down the hallway to lay claim. Then we stole a couch from the student lounge. So now everyone is happy. Edit a word. Story 22, I used to work IT in a school and hung out in the staff room. It was actually boring as mainly bitching about unruly students or discussing family life. I started taking books in there and sitting in the corner reading instead of listening to them. Story 23, I remember going into the teacher's lounge when I was in grade school and seeing a calendar for a pool they had going about when another teacher that was pregnant was going to have her baby. It's not as crazy as them playing poker or rolling dice in there, but I thought it was interesting how many teachers were participating in this pool, since gambling was not allowed at school. Story 24, source family of teachers, and I am a youth worker in college for education. The most shocking thing about the teacher's lounge is that it is almost identical to every other break room on the planet. Teachers' conversations range from to drugs to family and work-oriented topics. The kicker being that the person in the classroom often will take off the teacher's mask when they walk in. So sweet little MS, Sally, who looks and acts like a saint and an angel outside, is talking about hitching with a friend of a friend. You get a glimpse of it when you meet a teacher outside of the school out in the community. The kids I work with 16 to 18 were shocked when they saw me at the grocery store with a 12-pack of beer. Story 25, mostly, it's just gossip and lots of complaining. What weirds me out, though, is this bookshelf that's in there. It's kind of an informal lending library type of thing. Anyone can add a book, and anyone can take a book. The majority of them are trashy romance novels, some with titles that really make me wonder. Story 26, Thistle, probably be buried, but when I was a senior in high school, I used to go into the teacher's lounge on a regular basis for coffee. Every day, I'd raise my hand to go to the bathroom and come back 5 minutes later with a cup of coffee. If asked why I was there, I told them I was making a cup for the teacher. Story 27, once I got 2 packs of M&Ms instead of 1 from the snack machine. Was intense, not a teacher, but someone in my elementary put laxatives in the coffee machine with predictable results. Story 28, first school I worked at, it was really just general conversation. Maybe someone would tell a story about college or talk a kid. That's the wildest, I suppose. Current school, it's pure silence during lunch as we all are on our phones. It's amazing. Probably sounds terrible to outsiders, but honestly, when you've been listening to kids bullshit for the entire day, silence is golden. Story 29, back when I was in 5th grade, I remember walking by the teacher's lounge, and when the door opened, all this smoke came out because all the teacher would run in there to puff on their cigarettes. Story 30, my wife used to be a paraprofessional before going back to school full-time. She was very close with the 1st grade teacher. On the last day of school before Christmas break, they were asked to clear out the lounge refrigerator. They just took a Sharpie and dated everything as the first day back from break. No one questioned why all the food went bad on the same day. Teachers basically don't give it the day before vacations. Another time, the 2nd grade teacher, who everyone hated, was bitching about kids liking shows like Jake and the Neverland Pirates. Basically, she was mad pirates were being glorified even though they were thieves and murderers. The principal heard this and made sure to make national talk like a pirate day, a big costume day in school, because he hated her back talk in staff meetings. Story 31, 2 of my fellow teachers and I were discussing the 2 girls. 1 Cup video. I had never even heard of it before, but the other 2 people had. They just hadn't seen it. One had only seen reaction videos of people watching the video. And he said based on that, it had to be some crazy. So we watched the video. We were all in our 20s while regular conversation happened around us. People ate their lunch, graded papers, etc. We had a really cool principal back then. He used to break rules and do things like smoke cigarettes in his office all the time. So we got away with a lot of stuff back then. When he retired, the new principal put blocks and filters on all the computers in the school, not just the ones for the students. Story 32. I have a really good one. Obligatory and not a teacher, but a professor obligatory. Some of this happened in the staff lounge, but was mostly online backstory. I'm an art history professor at Big State College, and we have a huge hall for staff. Now, normally, nothing really happens here, mostly just grading assignments, eating breakfast, etc. But the dean wanted us to work on an online database for handing in certain assignments, mostly for essays or notes, etc. Anyway, we got someone who was skilled at making websites and coding, etc. To be honest, I've never understood this myself to help us set up our individual portals during the mornings and our free periods, so he mostly worked in the staff lounge. It turns out, though, that he used to be a former student of mine and that I had caused him to fail. The event, well, as he was setting up my online portal OPs, as we call them, he apparently made all the buttons have labels, things like click here for extra credit, which of course led to my OP being mostly unusable. This guy was quickly fired for this immature act or rebellion against the system, of course. The next guy we had hired to help set up my OP was a lot better, though apparently my students still thought it a joke, which led to a lot of unscorable assignments being turned in. Needless to say, my OP for that year was a joke. The real kicker is, though, everything would have been prevented if my OP had just informed the users that it only wanted serious submissions. Story 33. When I was working at school, I only went to the staff room like twice, but the first time I was in there, another guy who was working there, we were both on experience, unpaid, we want to call it, went a little bit like this. Kid who was also in our year group got put in a coma the other day, and well, doesn't really affect me. Hopefully he came out of it, but he's a bit of a like other, yet true, and not bother that much either. Hopefully he'll get out of it, though. It can't be nice. Every other person in there mumbles in agreement. Story 34. Funniest, saddest moments. Several of us were in the lounge eating lunch, inhaling lunch. 20-minute shift. It was Friday, aka Jeans Day. We had a science teacher who had spent a few years teaching an American school in the Republic of Niger and was wearing a Niger football soccer jersey. The dumb dash jock, former PE teacher, semi-pro football player, principal, yes, I'm generalizing, judging, etc. comes in and says, in all seriousness, Mr. S, you really need to change your shirt. That is not appropriate. Mr. S replied, because it says Niger, a county in Africa. The dumb just grunted and walked out. We then lost it. Many teachers have left that school because of that principal, but that's another story. Story 35. One of my teachers in art school told us about the time she was very pregnant. She brought a water balloon into the teacher's lounge and convinced the room her water had just broken. She said people were shocked and horrified. I love that teacher. Story 36. I attended UT Austin, where my student teacher mentor insisted that I never hang out in the teacher's lounge. After returning to UT for our once-a-week meetings, he kept checking to make sure that I didn't hang out in the lounge. He reiterated that it was a cesspool of gossip, backstabbing, etc. After graduation, I taught advanced high school science classes for 15 years at 2 different suburban school districts. I would try visiting the teacher's lounge on occasion for lunch. I learned that my mentor was totally right. The most negative of the teachers would eat in there. Misery loves company. It was a total complain and session constantly. The teachers that most students hope they don't get assigned to frequent the teacher's lounge. Most of the cool teachers, the ones who still like teaching and were enthusiastic about their students and subjects, either ate alone in their rooms or got together in little groups in each other's rooms. I could go on and on with stories, but you get the idea. Find a few positive-minded teachers and hang with them at lunch. You'll have a much better afternoon. P.S. You do have to venture to the lounge or workroom if you want a soda or a snack. Story 37. Teacher's Lounge is the best part of the day. It's free therapy sessions with my colleagues. I love where I work. My colleagues are hilarious, and they keep me grounded. Yes, we do talk about students, but it's usually telling about an awesome kid or asking advice about a troubled student. Mostly it's sharing our own life stories with each other, be it juggling work and kids or farts and hot flashes. Of course, there's complaining, but that's with every job. I was diagnosed with cancer last year and missed half the year. Those teachers supported me emotionally and financially. They still cook for me, take me to chemo, and even built me a nursery for my newborn. I cry sometimes because I miss my teacher lounge buddies so much. Story 38. I'm not a teacher, but once in elementary school, my dad was running late for a PDA meeting, passed the teacher's lounge, smelled smoke. Instincts kicked in, so he kicked down the teacher's lounge door to find a microwave was engulfed in flames and put out the fire. Turns out my teacher was making Orville popcorn and accidentally set the microwave for 5,000 instead of 500 minutes and then forgot about it. Story 39, I'm a student teacher. So I suppose I can answer this with some inside knowledge. It was a week or so into the second semester, 2015 spring semester, and I was being shown the teacher's lounge. It was a very suburban school with lots of privileged teachers. That's the best way I feel I can describe it without insulting them for their upbringing. While entering the lounge, I was apparently walking in on a conversation about student teachers and how we have no idea what we're in for, like this isn't obvious for a new teacher or anyone with a job in general. I've seen this teacher actually teach before, and her style was great, and the students seemed well-behaved, and she had pretty good control of her class. I told her she can continue what she was saying since she abruptly stopped. Asking her this apparently was her tipping point. She started yelling at me and started to say, "You have no idea what it's like in here," over and over. She ran out of the lounge to her classroom and packed up all of her stuff and walked out. Story 40, I work in a very dysfunctional program where 2 or 3 strong personalities keep everyone on edge and really defensive. Some of the ego trips these people go on is ridiculous, and episodes of absolute cunningness are astounding. When I first started working there, we had a brainstorming session of what topics we could cover for a new class. This is an ESL department. In my ignorance, I thought that this was an environment where we could openly share ideas and discuss without ridicule, so I opened my mouth and make an innocuous suggestion, only to get basically called an idiot and undermined by one of those teachers. I didn't like using this word often, but she's such a... My wife and I bought a house about 6 months ago. She was beside herself that I could buy a house, like I didn't deserve it or something. Not to my face, but after I had left, Monty just bought a house. He's been rocking here for 2 years, John. How long have you worked here? 10 years. Do you have a house? I have savings. My wife has a good job. After this incident, I really wanted to talk to her about my house and talk about how big it isn't, all the cool features and things it has, really go overboard just to her off. Story 41A group of teachers would hold Bible study during their lunch period, and it was so annoying. I knew and had worked with a few of them, and they were terrible people and had train wreck lives, not very Christian. Story 42, I stayed home to watch the first moon landing. It was a normal school day, Adelaide, Australia, BTW. I was 8 at the time, wandered into school around lunchtime, I think. It seemed deserted, heard noise from the teacher's lounge, opened the door. I got about a 2-second eyeball in the room before a teacher came out, told me go home. No school today. In that 2 seconds, I saw streamers, champagne, lots of very drunk teachers, a women teacher straddling a mate teacher, teachers passed out on the floor. It made me happy someone else cared. My mom thought it was cool, and my little brother just wanted to watch wacky races. I thought I was a nerd alone. Story 43, we would usually go in there to complain about students. The director of the school kept bottles of liquor in the freezer. We would occasionally take shots together during rough days. Story 44, I used to help one of the teachers with PC-related stuff and often had to use the computer in the teacher's lounge. The browser was Chrome at the time. I think was set to load the previous session when launching, and the previous session would always have at least one tab open. Also, one of the teachers would swear at and kick the printer if it didn't work, and it was surprisingly effective. Story 45, I'm not sure lounges exist anymore. We have workrooms because we don't have our own classroom, so we need somewhere to plan and grade on our prep period. There's generally a lot of cursing and laughing, followed by long periods of silence. We're working. Being a professional is the worst. Story 46, I have witnessed a marriage fall apart because of an empty coffee pot and the stress of state testing. The best one was watching a love triangle destroyed because a guy bragged about going at it with the newest teacher in front of the other guy she was dating. Many harsh words were spoken, but I stepped in when it started to get physical. Almost every day is uneventful. These are just extremes that occurred at 2 different schools. Story 47, as the only male teacher, I hear lots of things that would make your ears bleed. One day, a bunch of the teachers, mostly middle-aged, were talking about their shaving habits down there. Terribly traumatic. Story 48, one time, while we math teacher were eating lunch, an English teacher came in to reheat her Chick-fil-A chicken biscuit from that morning. She stuck in the microwave with the wrapper in it, hit start, and the sparks started flying. She forgot that the wrapper had foil in it. That was some crazy. Story 49, at my old middle school, we used to climb onto the roof in the middle of the night. We found a hatch that was left open and we were able to get inside. The teacher's lounge was found to be unlocked. We proceeded to smoke pot in the teacher's lounge while we were their otter pops. We were students. Story 50, we get 17 minutes for break. By the time you pee and check your mailbox and get here, you've got maybe 10. Nothing happens but people cramming turkey sandwiches in their face so they don't keel over for the next 4 hours. Story 51, teacher myself. But nothing except the usual gossiping takes place. According to my father, though, who taught in my middle school for 34 years, swingers parties, not during school. Mind you, During school, they would keep it down to drunken parties complete with table dancing during the faculty Christmas party. Story 52 substitute comes in and sits down at the table. No one is really paying close attention as she eats her lunch. We are all chatting about our day and joking around. As you do, we start glancing over, though, and realize that she is drinking a Mike's hard lemonade right in the middle of a school day. Eyes go wide. People are getting jabbed with elbows. Oh, she was sent home immediately and never hired a sub again. Turned out to be a mistake on her part. Her son had put them in the fridge, and she thought it was plain lemonade. All of us felt horrible for her. I mean, we all joke about drinking on the job. Story 53, my mom was a substitute teacher for a long time, and I always asked questions about the teacher's lounge and what went on in it. She said it was actually extremely boring, and all it was really used for was lunch and grading papers. A couple of years ago, my mom finished up her teaching degree and got a full-time teaching job, and everything changed. They put her through an initiation where, after school hours, they're not silly, she had to do a beer bong. She hadn't done one since her college days, but she claims she took it like a champ. Apparently, when there are substitute teachers around, they act regular because they can't fully trust them to not say anything and get them in trouble. But when it's just the teachers, it's a fun time. Soon after, the athletic director was fired because of many things, including the beer in the teacher's lounge. Wisconsin. Story 54, I'm not a teacher, but I do have a story about a teacher's lounge being unable to breathe and due to a certain show and tell item when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. It's been a while, so I can't remember exactly. My family had gone on a spring break vacation to Florida. This is important because on that spring break, I found a head of shark on the beach. And being the bright and curious child that I was, I decided to bring it home with me. A few days later, we were told to bring in something for show and tell from our vacations or spring break, and I had the perfect idea. I went home, wrapped up the shark head in plastic wrap, put in a bag, and brought it to school after show and tell. My teacher said she would hold on to it for me until the end of the day where I could pick it up, where she would store it in the teacher's lounge. So I left it with her and then forgot about it immediately. Apparently, so did the teacher. A severed shark head was left in the corner of the teacher's lounge for a solid 3 weeks, rotting away and making the whole room absolutely foul. We only remembered it because the staff called it into us to let us know they threw it out. Story 55, I, along with a fellow teacher, at the conclusion of lunch, were tasting dots. Maybe 0.5 milliliters of this particular hot capsaicin extract called Devil's Blood. It was an exhilarating way to end lunch, have everyone laugh, and have our mouths on fire as we headed off to class. One day, we both decided to eat approximately 2 milliliters each of the extract on a small cracker. I don't know why, needless to say it was hot, but the real trouble came about 5 hours later, where both of us were bent over in horrible pain due to what we think was the extract irritating some part of our small intestine. The pain was over in 5 minutes. Thankfully, we were both on a free period and noon saw us go through the massive To this day, I still love spicy food and hot sauces and have not stopped eating them, but I will definitely avoid eating extract for the purpose of fun. Story 56, not in the teacher's lounge, but in the hall next to it. One of the teachers was walking down the hall and was asked by a woman about a particular student. She went on a rant about how the student in question was an idiot and would probably never amount to anything. It turns out the woman was the student's mother. She was in an area of the office where parents normally were not allowed, but she also volunteered for the school sometimes. The teacher had just assumed she was another coworker. My school has nearly 150 staff. Nothing much really happened as a result, just a help in of awkward. Story 57, not a teacher, but one time was after school, several hours. Mine, and I went to the teacher's bathroom. It said no students, but I really had to pee, so I went in there anyway. One of the janitors walked in while I was there, but he didn't notice me. Yeah, I'm bad. Story 58, teacher came in during lunch to announce she was going home because she had lice. Cue hysterical teachers. They stood up so fast they launched their chairs behind them as they stepped away from her, yelling, "Go home." Story 59, I was an intern at a school last year. Most of the teachers were 15 plus years older than me and married, but one of the young at heart older single male teachers and I became friends, and I think people were gossiping about the nature of our relationship. It sucks because then we didn't hang out as much after that. Story 60, not a teacher, but I remember that my middle school paid $20,000 to do a bug sweep of the teacher's lounge, as in to check for listening devices. Makes me really want to know what was happening. Story 61, something my professor told me happened when he was teaching courses in grad school. He had a student come in for a makeup test and proctored it for him in the faculty lounge, where there was a guy sleeping on the couches. Eventually, the student finished the test and left, but the guy never woke up, ever. My professor didn't even find out until medical personnel were called in after someone else realized that the guy had stopped breathing and was long gone. So somewhere there's a student who took a test in a room next to a dead guy, who to this day has no idea. Story 62, usually I would agree that nothing more than a bit of gossiping and moaning happens in a staff room. Nothing out of the ordinary, until recently. 6 weeks ago, I finished work for the summer. The kids had a half day, but staff had to stay around in the staff room until 3. The time is usually passed with retirement speeches. At most schools, these would be a standard 2 to 3 speeches. Lots of clapping deal. At my school, there are skits, they're bad. My head of department was retiring, and my colleague decided to make the skit. It was disastrous. It ended with them trying to get a sing-along to parody they'd written that nobody really knew the words to. So it was forced to end early. It was so awkward. It got weirder. The retiree then gave his speech. It took the form of a poem, ending with the line, "We could be heroes." He then disappeared behind a door for a few minutes, re-emerged in a skin-tight gold catsuit with a blonde wig and a guitar, and proceeded to sing the entirety of Heroes by David Bowie. The catsuit left nothing at all to the imagination. A small child was present. Nobody knew where to look. It ended with a smattering of confused applause and few bewildered members of senior management. It was one of the weirdest yet most wonderful thing I have ever witnessed at work, both in and outside of the teacher's lounge.